Yeah, I'm Asna Husin, and I led peace education program, a kind of NI Indonesia in Bande Aceh, on the northern tip of Sumatra for 11 years, actively for 11 years. And of course, and then the peace agreement between the government of Indonesia and the rebel movement in Aceh, right after the tsunami. All of you probably know tsunami occurred in December 2004, and then in 2005, in August, they had a peace agreement between the Indonesian government and the rebel movement, as I said earlier. So why the Acehnese were fighting? So there were many reasons: injustice, economic injustice, political injustice, and social injustice created anger among a small segment of the Acehnese society, but started with very small one, like 50 people. This is the so-called freedom fighter, the GAM movement. But then the Indonesian government sent really organic troops, trying to kill the 50 people, but then killing many others, civilians, and then the support for this rebel movement increased and lasted for nearly 30 years. And then the tsunami happened in 2004, as I said earlier, that actually opened the door for peace talk and discussion. Even before that, there were many peace talks and discussion, but sometimes failed, sometimes almost there, but it didn't happen. The situation in the locality at that time was very precarious. People wanted peace because after so many years in the state of war, they wanted peace. It was everyone, women groups, religious groups, students, activists, everyone. Before I talk about my program, so I led peace education program or NI Nonviolence International Indonesia in the province, in the Aceh province, for 11 years in response to this conflict between the Indonesian government and the rebel movement. It was a very difficult situation. I just finished my study here in New York, and then I went back home. That when we started the program. So what did we do during those 11 years? First of all, when I came, I started with a small program for high school. So we had two projects. The name of the organization itself is Peace Education Program or Program Pendidikan Damai. Initially as a branch of nonviolence, but then during the conflict, it was very difficult to be an international foreign outfit, and then it's becoming almost independent for some times, but it's actually a branch of Nonviolence International. So we started with one project, a small project on high school. Basically, at that time, we created the manual. We had to create a manual in 40 days. With a little money from UNICEF at that time, we had to create the manual for 40 days, as I said. And then I didn't have peace experience of such, but I got my PhD in religious studies, and then I was very active in interfaith, all kind of interfaith when I was in New York, in this country. So that, based on that experience, and then Michael was helping, and Dr. Karim Kro also helping. So Aceh is the area where Islam first came to Indonesia. So it's a very Islamic region. So you could not do peace education unless it's based on the Islamic orientation. That's one. And secondly, because Islam was seen to be a violent religion, gave us another reason to create a peace education program from an Islamic perspective. So our peace education program is truly a peace education program, probably the first peace education program, could be in Indonesia for sure, but could be in the world, because we really work on Islamic issues. So that our first program, but then as we moved, the program got bigger and bigger, and then second program for the Islamic boarding school came. So we run basically for nearly 9 years, 2 major programs. So because the first 2 years only high school, and then at the end we had this also Islamic, we call ulama project. Ulama is the term which means Islamic scholar, Muslim scholar. So the ulama project is a project for Islamic boarding school to train religious leaders or future religious leaders. So what did we created? First, very small manual we created for high school, like in 40 days, as I said. So the creation of these 2 manuals, especially the first one, I gathered 5 people from our locality. Some of them were professors at the university, some of them were for the Ministry of Religious Affairs, some of them were for the Ministry of National Education. And I brought them their expertise together. So every single day we were sitting and working to create, and then at night I would do the editing process to make the language of these 5 people, different language and different ability and skill, putting into a single mold. So it's really a great writing. So, and then we worked for 40 days, sometimes we met a whole day on Sunday and Saturday. That's the first one. And then that small manual transformed into a larger one when we incorporated Islamic ethics into the peace education. Because peace education is not part of the school system, while Islamic ethics or akhlaq is. So we wanted to integrate peace education through the Islamic ethics or life skills, you call now here, a kind of materials that you teach, except the Islamic ethics based on the Quranic principles, while life skills based on human needs. Basically the skills is more or less the same, or I mean one, probably the Islamic is slightly more, but those are the things. So it turned into a very thick manual, like 400 pages. That's the high school one. And then the ulama manual, even more scholarly. It's also another big manual of 400 pages. So what are in those manuals? There are many things. So the methodology, first we took 2 methodologies for the high school manual. The first one is learning by doing. And secondly, playing for learning. Those are for the high school. So basically, we were also one of the first to create active learning within the school context, and teachers loved it. Students, of course, they love it. And then, when we created the ulama manual, we added another classical Islamic methodology, thinking for reviving. In addition to 2, also thinking for reviving. So basically we ask a lot of questions. The questions on the side of the manual, for example, why do you need women to be the leaders of Islamic boarding schools? That kind of question. In the context of Aceh, as I mentioned earlier about Islam, the word gender at the time was kind of seen as a Western import. It was seen as such is not a good term. So, however, the term was not important for us. The principles are, because when you talk about principles, those principles are as all as humanity and as all as Islam itself. So we give example from the Islamic classical experience. I'll give you an example. One of the prophet wives, listening to the revelation, came to the prophet all the time, and then the revelation was informed to the community, first the men and then the women separately. Not women didn't receive from men, but separately. Prophet gathered women to listen to the revelation. But all the time is ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, to the men. God spoke to the men. And then if you are familiar with the Islamic revelation, actually there were many reasons. One of the reasons, when the questions arrived in the community, normally the prophet could not answer, for example, he would wait for the revelation. So the revelation came. So that one of the reason for revelation. In one of these, one of the wives of the prophet by the name Salama asked the prophet, "O Prophet of God, what happened to us women? Why God didn't speak to us women? Is there something wrong with us women?" And then one of the verses of the Quran, basically detailing about 10 or 8 characters of good human beings, came down. Basically, ya ayyuhal muslimuna wal muslimat wal mu'minuna wal mu'minat wal qanituna wal qanitat, and on. So basically, all believing men and believing women, all those who have, all men who have faith and women who have faith, all men who have sincerity or women who have sincerity. So all of this, that actually very gendered, right? It's so gender equality in terms of principles as all is Islam itself. And then when we brought that and we read the Arabic classical text, and they said, "Oh yes, this is from Islam. This is no problem." So for and another issue, this is gender. And we talks about right of education, that's no question, everyone agree to it. But what type, how do you, whether men and women have an equal right? So, and then in the case of Islamic boarding schools, for example, we ask, why do you have very few female teachers in your school? Why do you have out of 800 Islamic boarding schools in Aceh, only 10 led by women? Why? This kind of question is gender question, but without mentioning the word gender. And another, for example, we talk about corruption, because peace is also providing equality, equal access to means and livelihood. So we talk about corruption. Why we are not, you are as religious leaders or we are as teachers of leading citizens of the country, don't question corruption in our political system? What has happened to us? Why we don't think this, equal opportunity and equal access to means and livelihood is important for our human dignity? These kind of things we talk in our manual. And then we talk about human rights and women's rights without mentioning the word gender. Yeah, so, and then we show images. So for example, one of the image when we talk about identity, all of us have multiple identity, not just being Muslim, but being a woman, being a teacher, being a father, and all this. So we'll put a picture of a man and a picture of a woman. So that our image. And who am I? That the question both ask the same questions. And when we talk about to control anger, we put the same image. So, in fact, it is very funny because gender is so much into our thinking without mentioning the word gender, except in the meeting. At the end of our, after we created a beautiful manual, the ulama basically felt it was theirs rather than ours, even though the ideas, is a combination of many people. But because it was so much part of their Islamic religious system, they love it. And we brought 200 ulama from different persuasions, the largest probably organized by non-ulama entity in a very fancy hotel in Bande Aceh. And the head of the ulama leader, he was a very dignified man. And he said openly in the opening, and SIDA at that time, SIDA Canada supported the program. They had people, and no single seat of those 200 chairs empty. It was so full. And he said, first of all, he said, it took me 2 years to trust Dr. Asna that time, because I wasn't part of the religious upbringing. So you have to be, one of the things when you work in the community, you have to be very sensitive to their culture. So even though this leader he knew me a long time before in a different setting, but to work with the ulama and to create a peace manual for the ulama school system needed trust. It took, he said, 2 years for him to trust me. I mean, he gave the reason. Studying in America, married, and never studied in this Islamic boarding school system, and all reasons. But then he said also, look at all of us here in this room. There are 200 of us, about nearly 100 women and 100 men. Dr. Asna, he said, doesn't talk gender, but she does gender. Everyone loved that phrase he expressed. So basically, it is really, you have to work in, sometimes you have to walk a very fine line. But that wasn't the end, and we were in the state of war. The first 2 years of the program, Michael and Dr. Karim Kro could come now and then, but then, it was a very high fighting. No one could come from a foreign country. So we were working, and we were also had to report the police because foreigners came to our office. That was a very difficult moment. Sometimes our training at night had to close down before the end because of this situation. And there were a couple of times when the trainers from the very remote areas of Aceh could not come because of the fighting in the middle of the way. We faced with difficult challenges, yet we sustained because of the dedication of our staff, but at the same time also we believe what we did was the right thing to do. And then, of course, we train teachers 8 straight days, day and night, and because it's so much active learning, everyone loved it. The first day, too long a training, you start at 8 o'clock, you end at 10 at night. The first day, they complain about the timing, but then after the second, the third, and after that say, we can do more than this, because so much fun, not just learning, not just knowledge, but it's a lot of fun, a lot of games, a lot of improvement, and they enjoyed it. So we became very big, they became very big fan of this active learning. And some of these teachers, in addition to teaching peace education, they also taught other subjects. They even create the same kind of active learning for other subjects they are doing. So, and then all of these teachers train students. So at the end of projects, after 11 years, we train over 70,000 high school students and about 1,500 the ulama leaders, plus about probably 200 youth. The youth, because we had also youth programs. I would like to talk about some of the best practices, so you can see, I mean, the benefit of this program. In terms of ulama projects, I would say this, at the time, Indonesia just entered Reformation from authoritarian region became a very democratic country. So a lot of talk about women representation, about direct election, because we didn't have such. A lot of the ulama leaders within our community consider direct election to be un-Islamic at the time, and consider to be women participation to be Western. We took the material from the practice of our own prophet. We look into the seerah. Seerah is the literature about the life of the prophet, and there are million of pages of those. We dig some of them, and we brought even Arabic texts to Dr. Karim Kroh brought us books, and then we look and we translate. We brought to them, and at the end of the day, they said, yes, this is our Islamic. We have forgotten. We have not looked into our Islamic legal text, into our Islamic literature, because I mean this is apart from what I'm doing. If you are familiar, Islam carried knowledge and civilization for 800 years. There are million of texts and literature written by Muslim scholars. Only 10% have been touched. 90% are still in manuscripts in different libraries. When we say this to our ulama leaders, this is the reality. We don't know because we have not read. We have not looked into it. So that kind of things we provided. So a couple of best practices. One are about this religious leadership. And when we brought from the material, we said Muslim and Christians and Jewish and other religious groups have equal right, and they can live in peace. And then we brought texts from the practice of the Prophet when the Christian of Najran came to Medina, and then the Prophet, it was Sunday, and they wanted to say Mass. And the Prophet allowed his mosque to be used by these Christian leaders of Najran to turn into mosque, turn into a church. And then I said, in America it's very common, church turn into a mosque. Like Colombia, during the Friday prayer of the months of Ramadan, we use church in a Muslim place for prayers. But the Prophet did just the other way around. So those were things we talked to the leaders, and finally, of course, they embraced the manuals. In the field, a couple of best practices in the field. I'll give you an example. One time I was visiting a school in Southeast Aceh, far away from Bande Aceh, and then that area at that time was a conflict between the government and the rebels. But at the same time, when you talk about conflict, the government of Indonesia, first of all, the knowledge about ethnic groups in Indonesia, Javanese, Javanese, the largest ethnic groups in Indonesia, probably about nearly 50% of the Indonesian population, could be even more. So when you talk about the government, it's always because they are the majority associated with the Javanese. So during the conflict in Aceh, Javanese and Acehnese were fighting sometimes for no reason. So that particular area in South East Aceh, the school was so like almost the very class we were visiting, almost 50-50. They had 40 kids, almost 20 Javanese, 20 Acehnese. So what happened, the setting in Aceh, normally long bench, and they sit, boys and boys sit, girls and girls sit together. So what happened in this class, the Javanese would sit on this end, over there, the Acehnese kid would sit on that end. They didn't want the middle empty, they didn't want to sit, because their families and their communities were fighting one another. So when peace education started, because we were informed during the training by the teachers, this is the reality in our school, what do we do? And I said, we have a lot of active learning here. So first try to bring these kids together in kind of discussion group or in a play. For example, a play for equal opportunity. If you have these many games in our manual, play with those and bring them together. At the beginning, it was difficult. One person would join in the group, but they try always separate Javanese with Javanese and Achenese with Achenese. But then after 3 weeks, I was told the children begin to do together. And they began even question why we dislike one another, why we fight among ourselves. This kind of question and discussion at the end of 10 weeks, I was told, because the class 16 weeks, at the end of 10 weeks, I visited at the 11th week. Yeah, week 11, I visited the school. At the end of 10 weeks, basically week before we arrived, the children were so united. In fact, they were bicycling. Yeah, they took bicycle to the class. They from school they would go together. Yeah, go leave for their home. Before approaching their village, they would separate again. They didn't want to show their community that they were friends. So this is one of the best practices. Another, I'll mention one more and then I'll end here so you have time for questions and answer. And another, there were many of course, but another, there was a manual of right to education. When we talk about human rights, there was a section right to education. So in another school, and then in the past, students would love the reality when the teachers were not there. So they could play, they could enjoy. So in this school, when they learn about their right to education, so when the teacher didn't come, they would go to the office of the teacher, they would knock the door, time to study, right to our education. At the beginning, the principal and the teacher are asking, what is this? What is going on? Then you teach us right to education. And no, the teachers don't come. You have to give us education. And then, of course, teachers and principals had to create a different program even when the teacher is not there. So that kind of things, there were many, of course, our best practices in our manual and what we saw the impact in the field. Certainly the most lasting impact is active learning. Studied by the teachers, learned by the teachers, and now it's being implemented all over. And my last point, that was my last best practice. Now my last point, we were also one of the first to utilize Achenese proverbs to teach peace and for education. And Aceh, like many other communities around the world, they have all kinds of proverbs. For example, gender equality, they have. And then education, they have. Respect of elderly, they have. Love of your neighbor, they have all kinds of proverbs. So we utilize those proverbs because our manual started with either verse of the Quran in Arabic and we translate into Indonesian. And then we have a proverb, a Chinese proverb. Whatever the theme, we always have a Chinese proverb. So, and then that at one point, in fact, the Achenese didn't like to use their own language because as if it was backward, but we will utilize it. And then, of course, GAM, the rebel movement, also wanted to emphasize the Achenese-ness, begin to use and see the importance of this Achenese proverb as a means of educating people, not just about culture, religion, but also human rights, equality, and all of this. And at the end, I mean, we were very happy, but why did we stop? Because after 11 years, peace accomplished, of course, more works to be done, but it was difficult to respond. Yeah, it was difficult to respond, but the books are being used by people, and everyone is talking about peace now. Even though it is not in a structural way, the way we do in peace education or Nonviolence International, but certainly the benefit and the talk about this peace concept and Islam as a religion of peace and prevail to these days. So that's what we did. So I'm happy to, to entertain any reflections and thought. Yeah.
So, as you talked about how you started this program, it was probably really difficult to implement it the first time because you had to do it through religion, right? But at the same time, use peace education as like from the Western countries, right? Did you struggle to do it at first?
No, actually, the thing is, from the beginning, even though I didn't have, as I said, peace education as such, but I am a scholar of Islam, so I'm very familiar with my tradition.
So you have deep knowledge of
yeah, I have deep knowledge
teaching,
in my own. I mean, and also Dr. Karim Crow, created a very comprehensive bibliography on Islam and peace, and he had a long experience. Yeah, so he advised us as well. But the thing is, what the difference when we teach peace education from an Islamic perspective, because we teach through engagement and active learning, no different between teaching Islam and the only tricky part when we incorporate peace education through Islamic ethics, because teaching religion indoctrination somehow, right? How do you combine this without? How do you teach religion without indoctrinate children? That was slightly tricky because you cannot teach iman, faith in Islam, without saying Allah is the truth, the Prophet is the truth. We are still saying that, but no, we add, okay, when we say Allah is the truth, God is the truth, the Prophet is the truth, what kind of truth did he bring? What can we learn from the concept of truth brought by the Prophet or sent by God? This kind is all through active learning. A lot of questions we ask. Unfortunately, I don't have manual here, even though in Bahasa I would like to keep. Next time I come to New York, I'll make sure I'll bring. So at least you can keep, because you can see on this side there are so many questions. So there was no problem in teaching Islam and peace, because it is actually Islam has a lot, even a lot of its own values that is actually teaching peace. The only major difference in the context of Western peace education, you only see human relations, active peace, passive peace, yeah, and then you see within human relations the absence of war, and then the absence of injustice, yeah. But in the context of Islam, we see peace as a holistic dimension, started with peace with your Creator, and then peace within yourself, and then peace with your neighbors. While the initial Western concept, peace with your neighbors, right? And then also peace with your nature. So in a way, this is a holistic. So we have a globe, a kind of ball, a globe. Allah, the word God outside, but from there reflects all. It is very beautiful actually, because Islamic concept of God has multiple names. One of the names is As-Salam in the Quran, peace, and the source of peace. So no easiest way to teach peace except through an Islamic perspective. That was my argument, and the Muslim leaders and teachers understand it very well, because they have memorized the Quran and the verse that talks about peace and God as the peace and the source of peace. And to Him the peace return and grant us peace in this world, and send us to paradise, the host of peace. That kind of the supplication the Muslim recite every single day after a 5 daily prayer. So in a way, no difficult. In fact, the challenge was how do you combine the talking about truth within this active learning dimension. Yeah.
So, in your perspective, what would be the biggest challenge? Is gender equality, gender education, or peace education?
Gender equality was a challenge. Not so much about those principles, but more in terms of first the term, because term, as I said earlier, has been seen as a Western concept. So when you are able to unpack, that's the principle, by giving all the example. I gave one about the wife of the Prophet Salama, but there are many others. Yeah. So when you are able to unearth all of this questions or incidents in the Islamic historical past, you can bring, this is the principle, gender principle. Are you against this? Of course no. No one against the questions raised by the Muslims in the past, women I'm talking. That's one. And second, because, you know, there was a huge, what do you call it, discussion. Even within there is, what do you call it, a latitude of this gender equality discussion and discourse. Some are very liberal, like as if you hate a man because you are for women, right? There are some in the West, I'm talking. And then there are a more moderate kind. There are a more religious kind. So when if you introduce the extremely liberal one, it doesn't work. So, but we are standing normally. We stood in the middle. We try to, for example, like we don't talk within the ulama manual about gender as such, equal right of men and women, but we ask, do you think women could be Islamic boarding school teachers? Yes, everyone say yes. There is no distinction between men and women. So why you don't have more women as teachers? Why you don't have more women as the head of the Islamic boarding schools? These kind of questions actually give them reflection and the opportunity to think. And after that, this is gender. Are you against this? Do you say no? You are helping us. We want women to be teachers. We want a lot more men to be teachers. At the end, we could even ask very personal question. For example, an Abu, a very distinguished Abu. Abu, how many boys and girls do you have in the family? Oh, I have 3 boys and 2 girls. All boys are leaders of their... Why the girls are not? Did you prevent them from going to school and be the teachers? I ask such a personal questions. At the end, say no. I encourage 5 of them equally. But these girls, sometimes, I don't know, could be the environment, he said, that at the end, they would prefer to marry religious leaders rather than continue their own education. But you think if you were given a second chance, would you have done it differently? This kind of question, I mean, because we sat with them all the time, sometimes every single day during the week. So in a way, that trust, earlier I talked about trust, they trusted me. I could ask even a very intimate question. For example, I asked another intimate question. This is exactly this major leader, but I asked many others. In fact, I even asked him just recently, I visited Aceh. I said, Abu, no, people think polygamy is part of Islam. Everyone, if you are Muslim, you want to be a polygamous. Had you, I know he doesn't have many wives. He had only one loving wife. She passed away. Allah yarhamuha. And I asked him, Abu, did you ever have a chance to think about taking the second? He laughed and laughed. He laughed at me and said, never. And then, you know what he said? When you have love, I translate it. The phrase is different. When you have love for your wife, for your partner, he said, nothing can be replaced You don't want to share it. You don't want to share. This is enough. That was his answer. This is a very great leader, man with principles. So, I mean, these kind of things I could ask. So gender equality was certainly an issue, not just an issue to talk about, but also an issue to practice, especially when it comes to certain, what I would call like political, for example, no, in Aceh, I would call political conservatism. Not so much religious conservatism, even though there is also religious, but more of political conservatism. When people believe, you know, a woman cannot be a leader, what can you do? You will educate them, right? The part of education I'm doing, I don't educate taking just Western concept. No, it doesn't work in my community. I'll dig from the Islamic past. I'll read all these biographies of the, you know, the companions of the Prophet, how they live, how they, they live, how the Prophet visited them, how the Prophet ate in their houses, and I'll bring that to the discussion, and then everyone can read their own Arabic text. If there is an agreement, then you don't agree with me, you agree with the text. This is the text written by this, and everyone can read. That kind of things we do, but certainly gender equality is not just an issue in Aceh, even in this country you still have. But certainly certain societies now with, I call, trans Islamic groups that are very conservative make the existence of these groups makes our work more challenging.
It's the work of interpretation, right? Because everyone can interpret Quran a different way, and this affects.
Yeah, but there are principles. Not everyone can interpret. You have to have knowledge. You have to know Arabic. You have to know Islamic principle. You have to know certain things. Not everyone can interpret, because even though people are trying to do. But certainly, I mean, each time you read what they are doing is okay for the novice. But if you want a solid scholarship, you need to have real knowledge. I mean, you know, like each time as I was driving on the bus yesterday, I was able to finish 3 papers. While I was reading, not about gender, I was reading about, these great scholars in the past. One, a medical doctor, 2 others were, scholars who travel around the world and basically detailing their works and whatever land they visited. And I felt like, truly I am a baby. Not even a baby, probably not even born, looking at their scholarship. This kind of scholarship, I try to make them understand we are nothing compared to them. No matter how great your knowledge is. Truly, I felt I wasn't even born when I look how these scholars wrote in the past, how they travel in seeking knowledge. We are almost, I am almost nothing compared to them. Just so it's not just a matter in interpretation, but also more about the solid understanding of your own tradition, a solid understanding of Islamic intellectual heritage, history, and culture. This is what is missing now, in our culture.
I have another question.
Really
Okay.
quick. It's 2:11. It's just
That's
turned
okay.
2:12.
Okay, that's okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you talked about that you face some challenges implementing the concept of gender. Also, you mentioned corruption.
Mm-hmm.
Did you face any backlash or any problems when you were talking about it?
No, actually people were, you see, Bande Aceh is a small place at that time. During the conflict, before they were initially there were 80,000 people, and then everyone knew everyone else. And even though say they didn't know me personally, but they kind of knew my family when you mentioned, so in a way that, but during the conflict, of course, the population became like 1.5 million, but still the all original residents of Banda Aceh were all people. So basically, I received great support from everyone. University, I mean, I was affiliated with the university, and then the government, and then the ulama institutions. No, I didn't have any, because the culture in the ulama culture, they don't debate if they disagree, but they will ask to you privately. They ask questions. If they like, they implement after the discussion. If they don't like, they don't implement. I was one of the persons to be invited to the ulama meeting to talk to ulama leaders, great leaders. In fact, what happened before myself, they invited another scholar from my university, but when she came to talk, became a controversial, because the question asked and the way she responded, I don't know what happened. So, and then the next year they invited me, because through my work through this peace education, I knew many ulama leaders. They invited me. So this is really great leaders of Aceh, or religious leaders met. And I came, of course, I dressed very properly, but I didn't cover my face like some people with niqab. And then one of the ulama leaders challenged me about that. But I didn't respond. I listened to his question, I wrote down, and he asked like a few other questions. I responded intentionally. I responded all the other questions he asked and many others, and I intended not to answer these ones. And then he didn't press. After that, the head of the leadership who invited me, texted me, "You did very well. You passed the test." I said, "Was that a test?" "Yes, you did very well." So the fact, you just learn on the spot. Because if you had responded, it became controversial, right? So I ignored it. I didn't want to. As far as Islamic principle goes, I'm dressed properly, so I don't have to entertain one extreme or the other, because that is a kind of extreme, right? You can only see eyes. That even the Islamic context consider that one extreme, but that's some people believe in that. Let them do, but they don't have to force on others. So this is part of what do you call it? Coexistence and understanding of differences. Yeah, because Islam has a principle. The Prophet once said, "Al-ikhtilafu fi ummati rahmatallahu." Differences among my communities are blessing for them. That's, and the ulama recites and repeat this all the time. We just need to understand it, and then I'm trying to apply it within this context as well. So yeah, I need to go, and it really has been a pleasure meeting all of you, and God willing, I'll come back. And especially we plan the program.